My name is Jason J. Rock Houston, and you're listening to This Is Metal. And as usual, I have my co-host with me, Joe Lawson. It's been a few weeks off, Joe, since we last did this, so how have you been in between?
Doing good, man. Just trying to keep the fires burning and keep the metal playing loud.
Yeah, and I think that one of the last shows we did, we were talking about the recent passing of guitar god Eddie Van Halen. Today we're going to do like a whole episode dedicated to him. I mean, the guy's legendary career, he definitely deserves that. So,
for sure.
You know, let's get right into it. You know, sadly he passed away. I believe it was October 6th, 2020. And I will tell you, Joe, I was sitting in my living room working on the computer, and this news bulletin came on, and I had to stop what I was doing because I heard, newsflash: guitar legend Eddie Van Halen dies today of cancer. And while it was a shock to hear right then and there, I wasn't totally shocked because, like we previously discussed, I'd been hearing rumors. We know he'd been battling cancer for years, but I'd been hearing rumors that the cancer was getting worse and worse, and he was going between the U.S. and Europe for treatments over the last year. And he was trying to keep it real hush-hush. He didn't want too many people outside of his family to know. But I will say, when the news broke that day of his death, what I was kind of surprised to learn, I didn't realize he'd been battling it that long. Apparently he'd had the cancer since 2000, so I mean that's almost 20-year period. So that's a
hell of a battle.
Yeah, he might have lost the battle of cancer, but that's a 20-year battle, and that's quite.
Most people don't get to say that. That's for sure.
So he was quite the fighter. I guess the best thing to start this off with, Joe, I mean, do you remember where you were that day when you heard the news, and what were your thoughts immediately hearing the news?
Yeah, I was at work and kind of similar scenario, and then I heard it via a friend sent me a text, and then I heard it on the radio, and I thought, wow, that's crazy. And the day before my birthday, a rock icon's passing away,
Yeah. Oh, wow.
It's sad, the older we get,
Yeah, the more of these guys
realize our own mortality more and more, and you look at all of these. You think back when you were young and you listened to Van Halen, and everything just seems so innocent and so free and so good, and you can't imagine when you hear about those people passing away. Even now, it feels like such a shock,
Yeah, and like you said, it kind of makes you realize your own mortality, because the older we all get, the more and more of our heroes are passing away. I'm not just talking about guys in the music industry either. I mean, recently Sean Connery. I mean, okay, the guy was 90 years old too, but I mean, legendary actor, and he kind of went away, retired and lived out the rest of his life, I guess, quite happy and peaceful. And I guess he just got to that age where his body started to give out. That's what happens. But the older we get, the more and more of these guys, pass away, and
see him dying off.
Yeah, and talking about Van Halen's huge legacy and influence he had on everybody. I mean, all these great guitar players. I mean, one that comes to mind is Dimebag Darrell from Pantera. He was brutally murdered on stage. I mean, which I think that's the first time anything like that really happened, when a guy actually got shot on stage while he was performing. But I remember when they had his funeral, and because Eddie Van Halen knew what a huge Van Halen dime was, he gave him that yellow Van Halen guitar. It was on the cover of Van Halen 2, and that was buried with Dime, in his Kiss casket. I mean, what a send-off.
Yeah, that's says a lot about Dime, and it says a lot about Eddie, for sure.
Yeah, and I guess the next logical question for me to ask you, Joe, is do you remember how you became a Van Halen fan? Do you remember what the song was, what the album was that kind of turned you onto the band?
Yeah, for sure. Going back into this capsule of time for myself, I was introduced to Van Halen firstly through 5150.
Oh, interesting.
That was one of the first cassettes that I ever had. AC/DC Back in Black and Van Halen 5150. And I wore those two cassettes out. And I never even knew about David Lee Roth for quite some time, And
interesting. I dig that.
And I learned that there was a whole past behind the band before 5150 and Sammy and
oh,
that.
Wow.
So I kind of came in through the back door, and but they definitely, left a huge footprint, in rock and music history. And interestingly enough, when they were young and first starting out, I don't recall the exact label, so I don't want to misquote, but it was a very large record label.
Warner Brothers,
that turned Van Halen down.
Oh, wow.
And said that they would never amount to anything, and that I called them clowns or something to that effect, and was kind of poking fun of them. And boy, were they wrong.
Oh yeah, now let me ask you. That's a very interesting story, Joe, because being that 5150 was your first exposure to Van Halen. Now, let me ask you, before that, were you at all aware of who Sammy Hagar were, or was it kind of like me that you became aware of who the guy was through Van Halen?
Yeah, I became aware of who was who through that process.
Interesting.
Those were the first cassettes I ever had on my own, and I think I was like 11 or 12 years old, so I was just a kid. I didn't know anything.
Cassettes.
I just knew that I liked rock music, and I wanted to get some records of my own, and listen to them, and those were the first two I was able to get.
Yeah, that's interesting. That was, I think, maybe just a few years before CDs actually became the next big thing. Cassettes, like you said, and vinyl were the thing at the time. I mean, they used to have those 45. Remember those 45 singles that all the bands would release? You'd get like an A side and a B side.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I used to spend hours in the record store. A lot of people listening to this, what's a record store? It used to be a place you'd go and they had nothing but music in it, and you could spend all day in there. In fact, I did. I'd spend hours in there. I mean, just for people that are aware, I'm talking about Tower Records, Music Plus, Sam Goody, The Warehouse. These used to be, music stores from top to bottom. You could go and you check out, the latest releases, the band's catalog of music. It was just amazing time to live. But I tell you, talking about the cassettes like you were, Joe, I used to love cassettes because they were so little. You could take them everywhere. But the one thing is, I used to hate, when you play the tape to death, eventually, the tape machine would eat the tape, and you have to go buy a new one, or you try to get the tape back in there, and then it never sounded the same.
Yep.
Yeah, but that was a day, and interesting enough, Sammy Hagar, before he was ever a solo artist, before he ever hooked up with Van Halen, he was in this little band called Montrose. And if you go back to the very first Montrose album, 1973, great landmark album, and it's kind of interesting. I'd heard these songs like Rock Candy, Good Rockin' Tonight on the radio. But until he joined Van Halen, I wasn't. Oh, okay, that's the guy that's in Van Halen now. And I kind of discovered Sammy Hagar's career before that and his solo career through Van Halen, like you, Joe.
Yeah.
But I was introduced to Van Halen. Like, I was aware of David Lee Roth. In fact, when I really started to really get into the band was when they released the 1984 album, and Jump was a big hit at the time, and that was all over the radio and MTV back then.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, it reminded me when you mentioned Montrose. I never knew who Montrose was until I joined my first real cover band. I was 18 years old, and I lived in Ohio, and I was playing in a band, and one of the songs I had to do was Rock Candy by Montrose.
Wow. Yeah. And
that's how I ended up getting introduced to Montrose.
And Bad Motor Scooter has another one.
Great song.
A lot of great songs. And then through my love for Montrose, I came to discover the song on that debut album, Good Rockin' Tonight. In fact, that's a cover tune. That's that was originally an Elvis Presley tune.
Nice.
Yeah,
nice.
Interesting. And Ronnie Montrose, for anybody who knows the album that Joe and I are talking about, it's just called Montrose after a band. The band was centered around the guitar player, Ronnie Montrose. And he really should have, and he had a lot to do with, interestingly enough, influencing the guys in Van Halen before Sammy ever had anything to do with Van Halen. I mean, that's kind of an interesting part of his story is who would know that Ronnie Montrose have such a huge influence on Eddie Van Halen. Years later, he'd get the guy that played on the debut Montrose album. It's kind of ironic,
Yeah, it is.
And then also Montrose happened to be on the same label as Van Halen would be on, which is Warner Brothers. And you listen to that debut album, and that's the one everybody always cites when you talk about Montrose. That's the go-to album, and people also say, Montrose should have been much bigger than they were. And part of the reason they weren't is Ronnie Montrose, because the band was his, he didn't like the fact that Sammy Hagar was becoming such a huge star. He thought none of the guys in his band should be a bigger star than him. And so after 2 albums with Sammy, he decided, okay, this guy's becoming too big of a star. I'm gonna get another singer. And they chugged along, and Ronnie Montrose had an all right, career, but it could have been much bigger, and that's part of a reason. That's part of a reason why. Now, so going back to when you were introduced, and you're hearing this album 5150 for the first time. I mean, when you got the album in your hand and or a tape rather, Joe, and you're listening to for the very first time, what were your thoughts like?
At that time in my life, the music just made me feel good.
Yeah.
I liked it. I liked the way that it made me feel, and it was full of love. It was full of, it was happiness. It was party. It was everything that was good.
As good as all the.
But just put me in a good mood.
As good of as much of the band was centered around Eddie. I must say, I wholeheartedly agree with you that one of the things I always loved about Van Halen music, for the most part, it's pretty good time, good fun feeling music. Not really going to get you too depressed. I mean, there's an album Sammy did, the final album they did with Sammy, called Balance. Now that's got some pop tunes, got a little bit of everything. It's got some darker tunes, like there's one on there called Don't Tell Me What Love Can Do. It's a little bit of a darker song, but that's kind of what that album was about. But again, they had great tunes on that, even like Can't Stop Loving You. That's a great little pop tune. It's probably a big hit from the album at the time. But I'm assuming too, since 5150 was your introduction to the band, that like if you had to pick between the 2 eras of the band, probably you lean more towards the Sammy Hagar era.
I wouldn't say that necessarily, because I love the old Van Halen stuff with David Lee Roth, Diver Down, and all of that stuff, Women and Children First. And there's so many classics and so many great tunes from that era, and from that, the magic of that band was out of this world. So,
and a lot
I greatly respect
what came before,
both entities and their incarnations, and what they gave as songwriters and musicians is just incredible.
Yeah,
I say that both for Sammy and for David Lee Roth.
Yeah, I mean, I've been a fan pretty much for both eras of band, because I was a fan first of the David Lee Roth era, and then when I heard what they were doing with Sammy, I thought, a lot of people, when it first heard the news David was leaving, I thought, oh man, there's no way they can replace a guy like David Lee Roth, but they proved me and everyone else wrong who thought that, because they went on to have 4 number 1 albums with Sammy, so that says it all right there. But again, you got to have respect for Dave, because he's what came first, and that's what they built the band on. But people can say what they want about David Lee Roth, but he's not the world's greatest singer, but he was great for what he did with Van Halen, if you know what I mean. He fit that part.
Oh, yeah.
Him and Eddie, as much as they may not have liked each other, they had a great chemistry together.
Also, I gotta give props to David Lee Roth, because he was also from Indiana, like myself.
Oh, wow.
So.
But also Dave was very smart. He knew right off the bat, because early on, Eddie became known for his finger tapping and stuff, and I've heard the band talk over the years how Dave used to tell Eddie, hey Ed, don't let anybody, when you're up on stage, see what you're playing. Have your back kind of turned to the audience so they can't see what you're doing. And that became one of the things that they started doing. But it was not Eddie that realized that. It was actually David Lee Roth said, hey Ed, don't let anybody kind of steal your trade secrets. Don't let them see what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's smart thinking. And interestingly enough, I'm sure diehard Van Halen fans probably already know this, but maybe not. But originally, Eddie played the drums and Alex played guitar.
Oh yes, that's a very important part of the story. Yeah. Because I've heard them talk over years about that. That like you said, Ed started out on the drums and Alex started out as a guitar player. But and then even I think one day Ed came home and he's like, he heard Alex banging on his drums and he said, you know what, you sound a little better at the drums than I do. And they switched from that point on. But I think too, one of the reasons, especially Ed was such a gifted musician, is they started out. He started out on the drums and went to guitar. That became his main instrument, and then he learned also how to play the piano. So he could play more than one instrument. And I think anytime a guy can do that, it makes him a more rounded musician. He has a better understanding of what the other guys in the band are doing. It makes him a better producer, just overall better musician.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And then going all the way back to 1978 when they put out that first self-titled Van Halen album. I mean, that's one of the. I mean, that's quite the statement. A lot of people, that's their go-to album, or let's say that's the album where I was introduced to Van Halen. That was the first one I ever heard, and it's got so many great songs on there. And I mean, just go down the list. Jamie's Crying. I really love the song Feel Your Love Tonight. There's another one, I'm the One. And then Ice Cream Man. I mean, that is such a David Lee Roth song, if you know what I mean. But only Dave could write a song about having ice cream in the summer and just making nothing but a fun, feel-good song, And then you got the great guitar wizardry of Eddie Van Halen, but it all seems to fit together.
Right.
And then that also on the very first Van Halen, the track that opens it all is Eruption, which that's kind of Eddie's track. That's if you're an Eddie Van Halen fan, that's your go-to track because and it's very different for that time because not too many albums open up with an instrumental track like that.
Right.
And from what I understand, he was kind of doodling while they were in the studio, taking a break, and the other guys were doing stuff. And the producer Ted Templeman came in and he said, "Hey, what is that?" And he said, "Oh, just a little something I'm doing." He's like, we're going to record that for the album, and it's kind of interesting because, like I said, it was different for the time. You didn't hear too many bands opening an album with an instrumental track. Probably the only other instrumental track that's quite as well known, I would say, is Moby Dick by Led Zeppelin, and that's like a drum track for John Bonham.
Right.
But it was a very different kind of track, and I think it would kind of influence other instrumental guitar players like down the line to like do albums worth of just instrumental music.
Nice.
Yeah, and when you look back on that first Van Halen album, or when you think some of the songs are on there, what does that album mean to you? Anything in particular?
Well, yeah, as far as the first album that I had, obviously it's a landmark or unique and special to me.
Yeah.
As far as the first Van Halen record, I didn't get into that stuff until later.
Interesting, yeah.
And even to this day, I have a great admiration and understanding and respect for Van Halen and the talent that they have and the legacy that they left. But I don't consider myself a big Van Halen fan. I really don't.
Well, that's all right.
And it's not a dig at them or anything. No. It's just this is not my cup of tea. Now in my life.
Yeah.
But when I was younger and growing up and stuff like that, fond memories, very fond. And like I said, I still have total respect for them and the utmost admiration for their level of talent and their skill, their craft, their songwriting was very original. It was very unique. In fact, it was so unique that Kiss's management turned him down, told Gene Simmons to quit wasting his time with them because they had no chance of making it.
Yeah, in fact,
things like that. Record labels shot them down. People thought they were a joke, and they just enjoyed doing what they were doing and had fun, and they built a following, and they became huge, And,
in fact,
they did. But they, one of the things I think that stands out to me the most about Van Halen is they're unique, they're original. Nobody sounded like Van Halen. Nobody.
Yeah,
and to this day, nobody really sounds like Van Halen.
And each guy brought something.
Very original.
Each guy brought something to the band. I mean, kind of like what you're saying. like if people have a choice hearing, David Lee Roth solo albums or the stuff he did with Van Halen, I think most people would agree what he did with Van Halen. I like some of the solo stuff personally myself, but that was like the best of what he did. As far as a lot of people, are concerned, and it's interesting because David Lee Roth, I mean, he's not your typical rock singer. He's really heavily influenced by dance, music and stuff, and that's a big thing between him and Eddie. Eddie's like, I'm more of a rock guy, and Dave likes to listen to this dance music. But that's what he brought to the band, and that's why he was really quite the entertainer on stage. Eddie had his guitar things he would do, and Dave would be entertaining the people, live on stage, and he'd have these swords and weird things he'd do on stage. But that's really what he brought to the that's really what he brought to the band, and then it just became something else once Sammy joined. But then if you get to the next Van Halen album, going all the way back to the second album, Van Halen 2, it was kind of it sounded a lot like the first album, but like I'll tell you the standout track on there for me, I really love the track Dance the Night Away. That's one of those songs that I can't tell you how many times I've heard it in movie soundtracks or seen it, featured like in a TV show or something. It's not quite a dance tune, but it's a great rock and, like you said, just a fun like summertime song. And that's one of those songs. The minute you hear the opening track, you know what song it is.
Right.
Yeah. And then going back to the first album, only because I forgot to mention one of probably the big hit off that album was their cover of the Kinks song "You Really Got Me," which is interesting because a lot of people listening to this might think, "What are you talking about? You Really Got Me? That's a Van Halen song, right?" No, they covered it, but they did such a great job covering it that a lot of people do. Van Halen really owned that song, and they made it their own, and people really think of it as a Van Halen song, rightfully so or not.
Yeah.
And
interestingly enough, the split between Van Halen with David Lee Roth before Sammy Hagar entered the scene, Patti Smith of Scandal was invited to replace David Lee Roth, but she declined.
Yeah.
And then Daryl Hall from Hall & Oates was offered the position in 1985 also. Yeah, but he declined.
Yeah, can you imagine? And you can imagine the shock the guys had at the time. They weren't getting along too well with Dave, but they also thought, like a lot of the fans, that, oh my God, what is this guy doing? Leaving Van Halen at the height of our career, to do a movie and go solo. Oh my God, who are we going to get? So they had all these crazy thoughts, like you said. Oh, Daryl Hall, maybe Patti Smith. But then also I heard that Alex had thought before they found Sammy and decided to go after him, that maybe we just make an album. We'll write the songs, and we'll have like a guest vocalist on each track. But then they kind of thought, no, that's really not the way to go. And so I think Sammy luckily was the right guy. They got it at the right time,
Yeah, and 5150 was a huge hit. It was a #1 album and top 30 Billboard. I mean, they had 3 big hits: "Why Can't This Be Love," "Dreams," and "Love Walks In." I mean, that's a pretty good way to come into a band,
Oh yeah,
hitting a home run like that.
Oh yeah, I mean, and there was no denying it, because I remember I thought, let's see who they get to replace Dave. I'll give it a fair shot and see what I think, and pleasantly so. I'll never forget hearing that song, "Why Can't This Be Love," for the very first time. It was a little different sounding, but it was, as much as it was keyboard driven, it was also guitar driven, which is kind of cool.
Right.
And I thought it was a different sound, but it doesn't suck, so you know what? And then, when I got the rest of the album, I thought, hey, this is pretty good stuff. I could really, sink my teeth into this and rock my heart out,
Yeah. I mean, it was a great record, in my opinion, and I mean, as well as all the other stuff. Like I said, I don't want to cut David Lee Roth short.
Oh no.
I mean, wow, the stuff he did with Van Halen was just amazing and fermented in people's minds forever. I mean, truly.
Yeah,
that was a legendary lineup. There'll never be another band like that. I don't think,
Yeah, but then again, Joe, the interesting thing about talking to you, that's your story. You know what I'm saying? That's when you came into Van Halen. But I also dig the fact that, like you said, you got appreciation for what came, what came before. Some people, unfortunately, don't. They just and they won't even give it a listen, which is kind of sad because you might discover some great music, but. And then there's also David Lee Roth, and Sammy Hagar. I don't know if it, when Dave came back to band, I don't know if he would have been able to sing any of the, Sammy Hagar songs. I mean, because the songs Dave writes and what he's able to kind of sing with his type of voice is different than what Sammy can do. I mean, I don't know if David Lee Roth can, reach those high notes, but, Dave does what he does, and he's great at it, and Sammy does what he does, and he's great at it. And I think... The only Dave song that Sammy would sing is he would sing "Jump," I think, from time to time, maybe Panama, but he wanted to kind of stick with the era of music that he did with the band.
Sure. Yeah. And I understand that. I understand both sides of that.
Yeah. Yeah, but
as a fan, it's kind of, it would probably be interesting or nice to get to hear that, to hear Sammy cover David Lee Roth and vice versa. I can see being a fan wanting to get a treat like that.
Now, being that you were introduced to Van Halen through 5150, how did you feel like when David Lee Roth came back in 2012 and they did that album, and from that point on they were kind of forgot about the Sammy Hagar era, well, we're just not going to play those tunes anymore. Did that bother you at all, or did you kind of say, well, that's just the way it is, I guess?
No, in 2012, I was locked in the studio putting out the first Scream King record, so I didn't know anything else happened.
Wow. Yeah, but you make a very good point that a lot of times that things are going on in the world, and unless you're a diehard fan, you're not even aware it's going on. But life goes on, as they say. But it was kind of interesting because all these years there's been talk that maybe Dave will return, maybe he won't, and then he finally does, and they do this album. It's called A Different Kind of Truth. Michael Anthony was no longer in the band. That's the first thing.
Oh, was that the album that they had the video tattoo or something?
Yeah, and actually,
I think it was called.
Yeah,
I dug that tune. I really did like that. I thought it was a return to
classic.
The old Van Halen. I really did like that.
That's funny you say that. Anyways, that was the album they did with Wolfgang Van Halen, of course. He was much younger at the time, but it's interesting because you'd think, okay, this band, they haven't been, especially with Dave, they haven't been together in years. They're getting back together. They're going to go in there and cut all these new tunes. But what they ended up doing is Ed had his son Wolfgang go in, and they were looking through all these old demos of demos of old tracks that had never been recorded or anything. And he told Wolfie, I want you to pick out, what you think's the best out of these tracks. And that's basically what ended up being the album, is these old unreleased tracks. But for what it was, I kind of dug it. It was different, but I agree with you. The song "Tattoo," a lot of people thought it was kind of a stupid, silly song, but I really loved it because I thought, okay, Dave is returning to the band. That sounds so much like a David Lee Roth song.
To me, that's what the feeling or the vibe that it gave me was, okay, this sounds like old Van Halen.
And then you should go later if you haven't seen any of the music. I'm sure you've seen the video for "Tattoo," and there's a video also for this song called "You and Your Blues," and it's just kind of a crazy looking video, but it's really rock. The song's really rock, and it's kind of a little edgy, but it's different. And then another song on there I really dig is, it's kind of old. It's called "Old Frosty." It's kind of a different take on Ice Cream Man, kind of. It's not.
Right on.
It's not. It's the same type of song, is what I mean. It's not like a ripoff of Ice Cream Man or anything, but it's got that vibe. And some of that stuff, if you check it out, it's got that classic Van Halen sound. So, and it's amazing because I think when they did that album, Wolfgang was only maybe 15 or 16 at the time.
Right.
But he finally got a chance to work with his dad, and he he did a good job of filling in for Michael Anthony, because I will say, if you're a fan of the classic Van Halen, Michael Anthony's background vocals was such a key part of those early albums. His background vocal sound.
Right.
Yeah, and how important is that to you, like Joe, when you're recording an album to have those background vocals in there?
Well, having the right ones.
Yeah, having the right one. Don't
is really what separates things and makes gives it a different a fuller sound, a different vibe, a different direction, and having somebody else's voice interact with yours is kind of a unique experience, and it's never really the exact same. So
yeah,
it's always kind of a learning experience, when you're working with somebody new and they're doing vocals with the stuff that you're doing, So
yeah.
I dig it. It's it can be a really good thing. It can be a frustrating thing sometimes too, but
yeah. Because I tell you, Van Halen is one of the first bands where I realized just how important that could be. I mean, it's amazing that you take Michael Anthony out of the equation, and it's really noticeable what's missing. Yeah, but I do think Wolfgang, he did a great job of filling in for him, and you can't really fault the kid. I mean, who else, if they had the chance to play in a famous band with their dad, who else wouldn't do it?
Oh, of course, yeah.
Yeah.
And that was probably one of his happier memories. That he. I'm sure now, especially with Eddie passing away, Wolfgang probably looks back at that and thinks to himself, "I'm so happy I got the opportunity." To write and record with my dad.
Yeah.
And he probably is really grateful for that.
Yeah, and going back to like pre Van Halen, one of the main reasons the brothers got together with David Lee Roth was because they would like play gigs at the same place a lot, and I guess Dave was a little more from a better to do family, as far as having a little more money, and I think his dad was a doctor, and so Dave had these cool I guess he had a cool PA system that was really nice, and before that he'd rent his PA system out to the brothers, and he told them, "Hey, if you just why don't you just hire me to be your singer?" And that's, I guess, how they initially got together.
Yep, kind of a crazy thing, but you never know what kind of opportunities are like that waiting around the corner for you.
Yeah, I guess very early on, like Dave and Alex, Eddie's older brother, they were like kind of the business guys of the band, and early on they were the ones getting all the shows booked and everything, and they were kind of trying to manage the band. But as time went on, Dave kind of became more and more in control of all that, and I guess eventually by the time and then when Sammy joined the band, kind of Sammy started kind of taking control of the band very much like Dave, and eventually that's what led a lot of him and Sammy having friction. The brothers wanted to have more and more control of their own band. I mean, funny how that works out.
Right. Yeah, there's, I've watched a couple different shows, the VH1 stuff, and and there was a lot going on there too, as far as their
manager.
They had some severe alcohol problems.
Oh, yeah. In fact, I'm glad you brought that up, because both of them suffered for years, like you said, with severe alcoholism. But Alex was able to kick it years ago. I mean, I heard Sammy even talk about it recently, where Alex went to rehab and he was able to kick his habit just like that. Whereas Eddie struggled for several years, like just probably up until a few years ago. And I think up until the 2004 reunion tour they did with Sammy, he was battling alcohol severely. And I was reading recently where he was talking about in an old interview, Eddie, where how he became an alcoholic, sadly enough, was through his own father, because his father was a musician too, not quite the same level as Eddie and Alex, but that's how he spent his life making music, and that's how the boys became musicians, following in their dad's footsteps. But Ed asked, "Hey Dad, every time I get on stage, I'm having a good time, but I get such stage fright. What can I do to what can I do to get rid of the stage fright?" And he told him, and this was when Eddie was like 14 years old. His own dad tells him, "Oh, here's a bottle of vodka. This will kill it just like that." And he says immediately he got hooked on the alcohol, and then drugs would come later. I mean, but isn't that kind of sad? Your own dad kind of turns you on to that stuff.
Yeah, that is.
But again, they didn't know, I guess, back then what they know now. But and so that's part of the reason he struggled all these years, is just the alcohol and everything was and I guess he was kind of in denial about it for a long time. In fact, that had a lot to do with why him and his wife Valerie Bertinelli got divorced, because even up until the time Ed died, even though she had remarried and he'd remarried, she's like he was still the love of her life, but she didn't want her son growing up around an alcoholic, you know.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And in fact, I was reading that him and Stephen Pearcy, the singer from Rat, they were really good friends, and Stephen used to be a heavy alcoholic, and Edward used to ask Stephen, hey, can I hide my liquor over at your house so my wife doesn't know I have it?
Boy.
Yeah, could you imagine? And he said, okay, sure, anything for you, Ed. But
right.
But it's
that's like asking a cat to hang on to your mouse.
Yeah. Yeah, but you know, it's so true. Van Halen, for the most part, you put on any song and it'll make you feel good. I mean,
it's just good times, feel good music. That's for sure.
Yeah, and you know, there's also on the album. It's a Sammy Hagar album. They were also like great at marketing. You know, for years, they had this thing about they had these 3 albums. Okay, the albums were like numbers, like 1984. They named it. Obviously, that's the year that album came out. And then they thought, hey, what number can we come up with to name the next album? 5150. What's 5150? That's the California code for mentally insane. And then they had OU812. They just thought that sounded kind of cool, and it sounded okay. But after 3 albums of that, they said, okay, we're gonna call the next album. It's not gonna be a number. It's gonna be just a title. And this was Sammy's bright idea, which I really just love because it's such a rock and roll thing. We'll call the album For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge. I think most people know what that means, but also Sammy said, hey, wait a minute. If you abbreviate that, it spells out F-U-C-K. I mean, and then I didn't even realize it. I said, yeah, you know, now I stop and think about that. That is so true. But that was another great album because that was a song that had Right Now on it, and I think that was the first and only time the band won. I think they won a Grammy for that.
Right.
And then
sweet.
Yeah, in fact, going back to the alcohol too for a little bit, I remember when they got, you know, Dave had been in the band for a few years. Sammy was no longer in the band. They were getting inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but the only ones that showed up for the induction was Sammy and Michael Anthony, and they even gave Ed and Alex a nod and said, you know, Ed's dealing with some things, but you know, he's in our heart, he's in our thoughts, and I thought that was cool. You know, David Lee Roth didn't show up, but at least the 2 guys did. You know, they kind of represented. I felt for the band, you know, even though they were no longer with the band.
Right.
And then the other thing, you know, about the brothers, you know, I understand that they because they were brothers, they like just had such a click, like such a connection. They could tell what the other guy was going to play before he even played a lick, you know.
That's awesome.
Which you know, since Ed's passing, there's been all these rumors that, oh, Van Halen is going to carry on, you know, and his son's going to fill in for him on lead guitar. I mean, nothing against Woofy, but could you imagine that pressure if they were to even consider doing that? I mean,
right.
I think he could do it, but I don't know, as a fan myself, that I'd want there to be a Van Halen without Eddie. Nothing against his son, but I will say this. Just imagine how Alex Van Halen has been feeling. First of all, not only is this your kid brother that dies before you, you know, things go in the order they're supposed to, you know, Alex probably thought he was going to go first. But so not only does he lose his kid brother, but he loses a guy, you know, that just musically he's clicked with all these years. And I just can't picture Alex Van Halen getting up on stage with another guitar player in the band, even if it is his nephew, you know?
Right. No, they made an official statement that after Eddie passed away that the band is no longer, and they're disbanded.
And it makes sense, you know, because I don't think, now, I wouldn't have such a problem if they were to do like a one-off tribute thing. Now, I do think it would be a little too soon after his passing, but if they waited and did something like what Queen did when Freddie Mercury died like a year later, put on some kind of tribute show, maybe you could have Wolf in the show and you'd have different guitar players. And now for like a one-off, I wouldn't have such a problem with that, you know?
Right.
But yeah, it kind of, it sadly is what it is. But now, did you get a chance to check out that video I sent you that was released today by Wolfgang Van Halen, which I think it's called Distance, and it's a little tribute to his dad. It was pretty cool, and his mom's in it, and it's kind of like old home movies of them together.
Oh, cool. No, I haven't yet.
Yeah. Check your message box on your Facebook. I sent it to you, but it's a cool little thing, and kind of sadly that a lot of people are online attacking this poor kid. I mean, let him grieve for his dad. It hasn't even been just a little over a month, and he's dealing all this, and he had the solo album in the works for years, but I guess, like we said, Ed was getting sicker and sicker, so they had that to deal with, and so from what I understand, he was originally going to release another track, but with this, he thought, how cool would this be to kind of put out as a tribute to my dad, and you could feel like if you read any of his statements he's put out in the press since his dad passed, this kid's really feeling it, and I can't even begin to imagine what he's going through, because fortunately my dad's still alive, so I don't know what that's like. So I mean, sure. My heart kind of goes out to the guy, but I think in a way things are working out how they should, because he was great in Van Halen with his dad. That album they did, he got to tour with him, but I can't wait for when the rest album comes out. Just as a Van Halen fan, I want to hear what it sounds like. I dug the song that they put out today, which I guess is the first single. It's called Distance, and there's a clip, like if you go to YouTube, he did an interview, I guess, today with Howard Stern. I haven't had a chance to hear that, but the interesting thing about Wolfgang is very much like his dad. He's a great all-around musician. He can play bass, he can play the guitar, and I guess on his solo album, it truly is a solo album in that sense that he does all the lead vocals, he does all the writing, I think, pretty much. I think he does the guitar, the bass, the drums, everything, and so it is truly a solo album in that sense,
Right.
And then,
that's awesome.
Yeah, and then also, like I said, about Dave initially getting with the brothers was because he had such a great PA system, but also prior to Dave joining, I guess Eddie was actually the lead vocalist in Van Halen early on before they hooked up with Dave. But he thought, no, he goes, okay, I could do decent job of singing, but I'd rather just focus on the guitar. And I think things were meant to be the way they turned out.
All right, this is something kind of crazy. Original bassist Mark Stone of Van Halen, died of cancer just 10 days. Or Eddie died just 10 days after Mark Stone died. Of cancer.
Yeah, of course. He was a guy that was in the band very early on, of course, prior to Michael Anthony, obviously. But I think he was involved, like when they were playing backyard parties in Pasadena before they ever had a record deal.
Right.
And I never seen any photos of the guy with the band, but I did remember reading that, like you said, 10 days before Eddie died. And in fact, these kind of jerks online were kind of Wolfgang Van Halen was making comments like, I did know this guy. He was my dad's friend. He introduced me to him. I think I know who I knew. And these guys were like just razzing him online. Oh, you didn't know this guy. Don't say you did. And I don't know why. I don't know why people have such a insist on like attacking this poor kid. He's just trying to do his thing musically. Sure. And I guess now that Ed is gone, I guess he's also going to take over the famous 5150 studio. In fact, that's not only was the album named 5150 because of the California police code for the criminally insane, but that's also what Eddie named his album after, 5150.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess it was pretty like art, state of the art studio. In fact, Eddie built the studio originally because he got tired of using other people's studio. And I from what I understand, there's just it's like the huge vault of Van Halen. I mean, there's so many hours of unreleased music that who knows, maybe we'll one day get to hear, but maybe not, but I guess they're going to still allow other people to come in and record stuff there, so that ought to be interesting.
Sure. Going back to, you had mentioned an interview with Howard Stern.
That was just from today.
November. That was recent.
Okay.
Wolfgang confirmed the band's ending, stating you can't have Van Halen without Eddie Van Halen.
Oh yeah, that's the other thing. Because again, recently people were going online, and I couldn't believe this when I first heard it, because maybe like a day or two, these rumors started going around online that announcement Van Halen's going to announce that there will be a reunion. Wolfie will step in for his dad, and I'm like, huh? I don't. And then Wolfgang started like having trouble dealing with it. Like, I wish you guys would quit spreading these lies. It's not true. I guess what they were thinking about before Ed took a turn for the worse was they were considering like doing a tour where because I guess Wolfgang had wanted to go and do a solo album, but that was the plan. When they're gonna have Michael Anthony come back, and they're gonna do a show, maybe just like a one more tour or something. But they're gonna end it. Their plan was to end it on a high note, like have Michael Anthony back, have Sammy take part in a tour where they'd have Sammy do like half the set list and Dave would do half the set list, and I think that would have been the way to kind of end it on. But unfortunately, that didn't happen, and I think we'll end it on this, Joe, talking about our Van Halen tribute here is when it was first announced, like a couple people were kind of saying how at first, how come Dave hasn't commented on Ed's death? But interestingly enough, when he did, a couple of days later, it was just a brief statement, but it kind of was one of those things, few words said so much. Like he put up online on his official Facebook page a picture of him and Ed from the last tour when they're on stage together. I think it was in Los Angeles, but in any event, he had a picture of him and he said, "It's been a long, great trip," and that kind of said it all. A few words, but it said all that needed to be said. I'll tell you why. Because for rumors, for years there were these rumors that they hated each other and stuff, but I think in the end they had an appreciation for what each guy brought to the band. And
they had there's always a love-hate thing going on. You work with somebody long enough, you'll find things you don't agree with or you don't like about them or what have you. But I think deep down he probably loved him and cared about him very much, and vice versa. I'm sure there was times where they wanted to kill each other too. I got to only add one more thing. I know I said we're going to wrap it up, but can't wrap it up without mentioning this. I thought it was so cool that before, and they didn't make a big deal about it until after Eddie had passed, I guess because he didn't want anybody to know about it. But, for years, like Sammy would do these interviews and he'd be like how, I really miss Eddie. I wish me and him could be friends like we used to. And he'd say, he says, me and Alex get along, but all right. But he goes, Alex won't talk to me because he's so loyal to his brother Ed, and because they're brothers. I respect that. But he said, they're, and he says because they're brothers, these two guys would they would like get in fights and they'd love each other, they'd hate each other, but at the end of the day, they were loyal to one another. And then he said that it started becoming known that Ed was getting sick, and he reached out to him, one last time, and I guess Eddie kind of chuckled and said, "Oh, what's taking you so long, to give me a call?" But the point being, they finally made up, and how great is that these two guys that weren't speaking for years, right.
At least Sammy has that piece that okay, me and Ed made up before he passed.
Yep.
And I do think that's a great note to end on it. Unless there's anything else you want to throw out there, Joe.
No, that's very suiting, very good.
Okay, well, Joe, like I was telling you, next I'll be talking to you, and we'll schedule the show maybe for next week that we're going to do. But next time we do this, you and I were planning to talk about all things kind of Pantera. It's the perfect time of year to do that because, as you may recall, December 8th, I forget what year it was, but I'm going to look it up. So, but it's going to be the anniversary of Dimebag Darrell's murder that we were talking about at the top of the interview here, where he was, shot down on stage. But there's so much stuff about Pantera to talk about too, because, we mentioned them today because it just the huge influence that Dimebag had on, as far as Eddie Van Halen was one of his big, guitar heroes. So much that he was buried with that guitar. And I also want to talk about, 2020 marks the 20th anniversary of their album Reinventing the Steel. They recently released a 20th anniversary version of that. I think fans are going to dig that if they check it out. And
looking forward to it.
And then finally, sadly, Dime's brother Vinny passed away a couple of years ago, and the death of these two other brothers also has had a huge impact on the metal community. So that's something I look forward to talking to you about next week, Joe. But
absolutely.
Take care, my friend. And you've been listening to
You too.
This is Metal with Joe Lawson. Thanks, Joe.
Thanks.
Okay. Bye-bye.